Chapter 10. News Oft Rends. She would sooner draw the accordion from the leaf pile and be crowned the right sovereign of Rhode Island than open that email from her ex-husband. Given her less than pleasant experiences with the weather in the Northeast, her disposition against the presence of fallen leaves lumped together to rot, and her general contempt for what she felt was the most inelegant of all musical instruments, that was saying quite a great lot about how much she wanted to read the message from her ex. Meridia knew the significance of the email, and knew how it put her own existence into perspective. She was divorced from him, but legal reality only encompassed one part of existence. She knew that some communication between them had to occur, because with or without direct legal link joining them to each other, their lives were still entwined by Minerva, and that was a truth that stood beyond all else that she may want. What she wanted, what Meridia expected to be in this email, provided her with a savory pain of uncertainty. She could not be sure why he would choose to use her familiar name. If he was trying to get her affection for some sort of attempt at reuniting, she was not susceptible because there was too much water under the bridge. She would sooner be embarrassed for him if he was pleading to win her back than even consider any option or course he could offer. Her heart was open to the possibility, but refused to accept him at this point. She could accept being linked to him through their child, but in no other way would she want to continue any further life with him. He was relegated to memory, and those memories were where she would rather he stay, so she could pine for that time, not for the partner. The partner no longer existed as he was in her memory, and she accepted that. Yet perhaps she was reading too much into it. Maybe he thoughtlessly started his email with "Hi, Mary" as a sign that sometimes the past caught up with him as well as it did to her on occasion. Maybe it was a simple slip, or perhaps it was a sign that he was softening, and theirs might become a good friendship. Maybe he was trying to soften her to ask for some sort of favor regarding the visitation schedule. All the maybes were what agitated her in a not unpleasant way, and she ran these possible scenarios as she walked to her car, where she began driving immediately. Her own ethics denied her the chance to read the email on her phone while she was piloting the auto, and she turned on the radio and only passively listened to the reports regarding the refugee matter in Europe that dominated the news. She found the reports only slightly distracting from the anticipation bubbling in her mind from the email. The truth of the situation seemed absurd. How could she be so blissfully self-centered when the rest of the world was hanging with a loose grip to the tendrils of civilization? What was the cause and end game of civilization anyway, if not love? She shut off the radio. Did this email and her preoccupation with it, did this fall into the category of love? Could love really be this simple and drab, so dispassionate as to be merely ripples of feeling based largely on what was uncertain? It would make perfect sense, she thought, if her feelings were giddy with the notion of getting back together with him, but she definitely did not want that to happen. There was feeling connected to this situation, though, and her mind could only categorize this as a variation of love. That simple use of the familiar name, that slight recognition was enough to establish an echo of emotions long gone that she had once held for him, for them. To what end now? to feel and see with childlike abandon the shadow left by those times now hearkened with simple word. This abstract vantage of her feelings needed to cease, or she would drift into daydreaming while driving, and drift the vehicle into the guardrail if she were not careful. She turned the radio back on and turned off the capital of Texas highway toward the Mount Bunnell overlook. Whatever the email might say, she wanted to be in a place she felt noble when she read it. The roads turned and twisted along the incline towards the terrace, and she found no respite from the anticipation gnawing at her. The possibilities were wearing her out, and she wanted to avoid the idea that he would confess a love for her. That was not what she wanted, but she could not help but to entertain the thought, and the thought was far from entertaining. Like an insight into what the narrative of her thoughts could appear to be, she pondered something from the surface of her life. The happy marriage that she once had never truly was, or perhaps it was happy at one point and then ceased to be, for too many reasons than the once happiness could ever justify. She really was happy with her life as it was now, and she could not imagine the effort that would need to be put forth to attempt to reignite what had been extinguished. She thought of the couple she had massaged in the last few months. They appeared content with what she could clearly see was a comfortable emotional distance that had been between them. She did not really know their full story, but recalls how the back muscles of the husband had slackened in her grip as he spoke frankly about his frustration with his wife for what he felt was coddling their daughter. Meridia had made minor comment regarding the need for balancing freedom and protection in terms of children, and mentioned her own 10-year-old daughter. The man had brightened up and his muscles relaxed when he noted the similar age of his daughter. The minimal speaking was almost as integral to relaxing his stress as the methodical massage was to calming his strained muscles. When the massage was done, he was so impressed with her work that he told her he was going to book his wife for a massage. Meridia was used to such for a myriad of reasons, ranging from providing to the wife that there was no cause for jealousy to earnestly hoping the massage would help the spouse find stress relief. About a month ago is when she massaged the wife, and luckily she recalled the advice she had given the man. Stating the same to the woman, Meridia noticed a similar release of tensions. It dawned on her that both of these partners, both points of this dyad, married and raising a child together, stood on opposite ends of the spectrum regarding the issue of which held greater importance, safety or freedom. All she had to do was remind both that a balance had to be found, and that the balance would not be a perfect stillness, as the world itself is in motion. She remembers telling both the husband and the wife about the Foucault pendulum at one of the eastern buildings of the University of Texas, how it would swing side to side slowly and with constant direction. Over a full day, however, the pendulum appeared to slightly alter its trajectory with each swing, so that it moved about a circle. The thing was, the pendulum did not circle but merely swung back and forth. The earth was spinning, though, and it moved under the swinging pendulum, creating the illusion of the circle. The entire set-up was a reminder that the world was always in motion, and that balance, as a static sense of being, was imaginary. In reality, a reality in motion, balance would be in motion too, reflecting the changes in what was being balanced. Both were given to great thought on the subject, or at least there was a modicum of silence in response. Thinking back to it, Meridia wondered if she inadvertently helped the couple sustain their marriage despite the evident differences in philosophies regarding raising their daughter. Would they even see it as a difference in philosophy? The couple was clearly working class, if such could be a term to fit anywhere at this point in time. Neither seemed to be college educated, and she wondered if that worked to their advantage or detriment in marriage. Meridia wondered, with almost pride, if education had a negative impact on interpersonal relationships. The more educated a person became, perhaps, the less likely they would be to accept another person in close quarters, long-term, intimate coexistence. As though once the light is on in the liberated mind, the darkness cannot be used to overlook shortcomings and flaws in the mate. She scoffed at herself as she parked her car near the stairs that led up to the overlook. While ascending up to the terrace, she wondered why there was still reason to call for a mate in this world. Why would persons be inclined to try to connect with someone closely and maintain it when clearly everyone had their downside? Would there ever truly be a reason to maintain a long-standing connection to another person in the most intimate of manners? Why would mate and intimate be words so ingrained into her psyche that she would easily think them, with the sheer gloss of their meaning, as a social function that now appeared archaic to her? Truthfully, if mate was etymologically explained by most folks, the mysticism of interpersonal relationships might be removed. It could mean someone to sit and eat with, as that might be the most vulnerable point at which a person could be, without the acts leading to procreation being considered. It could also mean to overcome, as in to win out over. So in essence, everyone is searching for someone they can eat with and win against. It would be so simple if there was that basic understanding in all who came to consider marriage, that marriage would be a simple social contract, and that the emotional accoutrement tended to be against the validity of the arrangement. She could easily see the life she lived now, brilliantly and with clarity of vision, like the grand scope before her eyes from the terrace, the Colorado River far below, and a view of brilliant blue skies kissed with the kind wind sweeping across, invisibly giving life and motion to that which she knew only by the motion of the air across the trees in the hills across the river. She knew she could happily coexist with her ex-husband now that the emotional rigmarole was no longer a factor. In commanding herself to accept that knowledge, she walked from the edge and unlocked her phone, opened the email application, and opened the email. Hi, Mary. I want you to know this before I tell Minerva, because it is something that will greatly impact her, and it will require both of our efforts to help her make the transition. I waited this past week because I have been procrastinating in worry about how you will react to this, but there is only so long that I can play the coward before I need to be direct and honest with you. You know that I've been dating Melody, and I know you don't care to know about that part of my life. However, there is now a reason for you to be informed. I proposed to her and she accepted. Our wedding will be next May. Meridia let fall her hand holding the phone. She felt the blood drain away from her face. She wished that this was an earlier epoch, and that she could crumple up the paper letter in which the news arrived to her, crush it and tear it up, and throw the pieces out over the edge to let the wind scatter them. If she let herself go that route of action, she would watch the less satisfying spin of her phone as it curled through the air and clanked on the rocks below, unless she had enough strength to plunk it into the water. She did not fling her phone, however, and swallowed hard this moment, regaining control of her own senses above the emotional reaction. Melody had been a childhood friend of her ex, and they had reconnected about 6 months after the divorce. Meridia had met her and found her to be kind. Minerva liked her, and that was cause for Meridia to find distraction in artistry to avoid a tumbling jealousy and negative feelings, negative thoughts of someone who she could otherwise see was not at all a bad person. The notion of being replaced or even supplemented as a mother to her own daughter seems ridiculous now. Melody was a few years younger and had no children, yet might want to have children of her own. This was a new development that stirred up a very primal reaction from Meridia that she did not like about herself. She knew the feeling was based on the idea that the resources of her husband would now possibly become dedicated to someone other than her own daughter, and she could not believe that it felt as it did. She lifted the phone to read the remainder of the message. And I do not expect you to happily meet this information, but I do ask you to work with me in helping Minerva transition to this new form of her family that is coming into being. Melody is not going to replace you in any way, shape, or form, but she is going to be a constant presence in our daughter's life, and I ask you to help our girl understand. If you'd like to discuss this with me, I hope you would be all right meeting in a public place. If not, I hope you would limit the email correspondence regarding this matter to only the practical aspects of this as it relates to Minerva. Best, Adam. The bastard's formal tone and his way of trying to cover all the bases angered her, as though he anticipated the reaction she had, which she herself despised. She wondered if he could anticipate that she would get over it and move on with her life, that this would be a catalyst more than an obstacle. Whether he could or not made no difference. She vowed to herself to be more than her initial reaction.